Welcome to Branch Ed's Survey Says, Developing and Validating Surveys. We'd like to welcome you. Our agenda is, we'll start with our welcome and overview, the connector, data quality, survey development and validation process. We'll explore the toolkit. For the live session, there was a breakout and share out session, closing, and then question and answer session and office hours. Who we are. Branch Ed is a professional services organization and a collective of university faculty and leaders advancing educational excellence by expanding individual capacity, enabling supportive relationships, boosting institutional effectiveness, and collaborating with communities. We provide the following customized learning opportunities for individuals, institutions, and communities. This workshop will be recorded and available in a follow-up email. All resources and links will be shared. The facilitators for today's session are Dr. Patty Alvarez-McCatton, who is the Chief Program Officer for Branch Ed, and Dr. Elizabeth Lissick, the Assistant Director for Birch Professional Learning Center. The workshop objectives are: participants will recognize the importance of validity and reliability in educational survey design, learn practical strategies and techniques to enhance the validity of survey instruments, and finally, explore a protocol to guide survey validation efforts. If you have not already, please take this opportunity to sign up for the Branch Ed resource portal. And the link is resources.educatordiversity.org. Our connector today is: what surveys do you use to inform your program improvement efforts? What purpose do they serve? And how were they developed?
All right. So we're going back. And so we're going to start talking about data. And so Branch Ed has a framework for quality preparation of educators, which some of you may be familiar with. That framework encompasses 6 principles. The green band that you see around the graphic is community of learners, because we believe the work that we do is not an individual endeavor. Right? We really need a whole ecosystem in order to do the work that we do. The purple color that you see in this graphic is data empowerment. And that's, I would say, almost the next most important principle, because everything that we do around program improvement and preparing teachers and ensuring positive outcomes for our PK-12 learners and our communities really needs to be data informed. The other 4 areas pertain to practice-based approach, intersectional content, equitable experience, and inclusive instruction, but we're focusing specifically on data empowerment for this conversation. So we're going to start big, and then we're going to kind of narrow down to our topic at hand. So what are the indicators of data empowered? So the indicators are data quality. So we want to make sure that the EPP is gathering data on a regular basis that is valid and it's reliable. The next one has to do with data analysis and interpretation. So that means the EPP is convening a group of stakeholders on a regular basis to systematically look at the data, interpret the data, and then develop actions to improve whatever the findings are. Evaluation of instruction is really looking at individual courses and instruction that is taking place within those courses and how that informs the program quality, both at the individual course level, but also at the program level. Formative assessment means you're triangulating data and you're really monitoring the progress of your candidates and giving them multiple opportunities to learn, practice, and demonstrate proficiency of the skills, knowledge, and dispositions that we want all teachers to demonstrate. Quality assurance means that you are looking at your program not simply in isolation, but you're also benchmarking the outcomes of your program with other comparable programs, with other PPPs, similar EPPs. And then finally, that you're using data to be innovative and to really think about implementing new ideas, new engagements in order to ensure that you're continuing your program improvement efforts. So data quality is the foundation of data empowerment. So the process is to ensure data are trusted, accessible, and usable. So that means that the EPP is ensuring that the data are complete, unique, valid, timely, consistent, and accurate. So those are the areas that data quality need to focus on.
Yeah. So if you think about that, we had that big framework, we narrowed that down into the data empowerment strand, and then within that, the indicators of data empowerment, looking at data quality, because what we know is that when we're talking today about surveys, that it really is, surveys in many ways are a really powerful way that we are already using to gather and collect data, right? It helps us to inform our program improvement efforts, reflect on what's working, where are our opportunities to go deeper, what is it that our students really need, what is it that our community is asking for. So we know that, you know, having worked in EPPs, we know that surveys in many ways are a source of a great deal of data within our programs. We're using these tools. So as we thought about this workshop, we said, you know, our goal is for us to say, let's make these surveys the very best that they can be. And so one of the ways, so some of what that looks like is walking through a process. And so what we're going to share with you today is a process that begins with instrument development and goes all the way through, you know, gap validity and reliability testing and piloting the survey to collect data and really enhance the efficacy of the instrument. And so we're going to start jumping right in here with phase one, which is developing the survey itself. Oftentimes there are surveys that are already developed, right? We have access to tools, like we said, maybe they came from the state, maybe they came from a research group. But sometimes we have unique needs within our programs. We want representation from our community in our tools. And so we need to develop those instruments. We need to develop those tools and surveys. And so this, as we know, as I'm sure you have experienced, isn't just saying, what do I want to know? Let me jot down that question and send it out, right? If there's a systematic process involved, and it begins by getting input from subject matter experts, from other key stakeholders in our field, from the literature, exactly. And so as we are pulling all of this in, it's informing the development of our survey and our instrument. Some things we wanted to share that kind of rise to the top for us as some of our best practices in survey design. And it begins by really knowing what is our goal, right? We can have a survey for all the things, right? But truly, what is the thing that we are trying to learn? We don't want to have one thing, one survey that's capturing data on a million things. We have one clear, attainable goal. And with that in mind, we're keeping it brief, simple, and specific, because we know we've taken those surveys. We were in grad school and took our friends' instruments that they developed and got lost in page 17 of questions, right? So we know the power in keeping it brief, simple, and specific, and having an intentional organization. We know one of the things that I think about here is we're not going to ask them, some deep held to talk about some deep, closely held belief under question one, right? You're going to warm up with some things that are a little more palatable or some things that are a little easier to respond to, and then be intentional about how we're structuring our questions. A good practice when we're designing our survey is to allow respondents to answer that something is not applicable to them. And that matters because when we don't give them that option, it can really muddy our data. Because if there is something that isn't applicable, it's a required question, oftentimes they'll just pick an answer. Our respondents will feel like they have to choose an answer, and it may not truly be an accurate, aligned with what they want to share with us. So providing that opportunity helps clarity in our analysis later on. Giving that time estimate up front with a short introduction about your purpose, that clear, attainable goal that you created, and then testing and piloting the survey and the survey platform beforehand. If you're using a new system to push out your survey, highly recommend testing it beforehand, having that your pilot test group use the same platform you're going to be using to disseminate your survey more broadly. We wanted to touch on, since we're talking about development, since we're talking about survey design, on a few survey question types that we always have to keep in mind that can be a little problematic for our respondents. And so I'm sure you've heard of some of these before, but sometimes it helps to bring this to the top of our mind. And that's, the first is a leading question. Like we could ask you at the end of our time together today, were we helpful in answering your questions about validity? Were your friendly facilitators helpful today? Well, that is really prompting to you that we are looking for a certain type of response, right? And it really can lead. We have the power to lead our respondents down certain paths in our questioning, and so we want to be very mindful of that as we are approaching our survey questions. Loaded questions include, an assumption, or they're forcing our respondents to agree with an assumption. So I love the example here. How much will test scores improve because of the new reading program? We are clearly making that assumption that test scores will improve, and that our respondents may or may not agree with that. And we don't want to force response in agreement with that assumption. And then we have our double-barreled questions, which are unclear and again, muddy our data because they're asking for respondents to speak to two different items with one response. How will test scores and attendance change because of the new after-school program? Well, I may think test scores are going to improve, but attendance is going to go down because they're going to be so tired from all of the extra things they're doing, right? We have to provide opportunities for our respondents to speak to both of those issues individually. The other thing that we wanted to surface when we're thinking about survey development is how we are considering inclusivity in our questions, because like I said, we have, just by the wording and framing of our questions, we have a lot of opportunity to bring people in and make them comfortable and safe in our survey spaces, or to make them spaces that are not welcoming or not inclusive. And one of the things here is to be thoughtful about the demographic questions that we ask. We can have a tendency to just say, well, maybe we'll need it later. Let's just go ahead and ask it, right? And ask lots of questions and make them all mandatory. And so, when we're thinking about inclusivity, it's I think important to only collect what we actually need and to provide some flexible options for our participants when we're asking them to identify themselves within our survey, right? So either leaving open response or providing multiple responses for our respondents can really create a space within our survey that is more inclusive. And along with that, only make questions mandatory if they really need to be, because sometimes what I've found is that when I require a response to every question, you see a drop-off point where maybe we get to a question that is more uncomfortable, or I'm not prepared to answer today, or I'm not comfortable answering today, and I will exit the survey as opposed. And so then that makes that data less usable for us as researchers or as educators. And then third, being mindful of the language used, thinking about context, thinking about history, thinking about the implications in the statement we make. And oftentimes it's unintentional, but we may, and that's where I'll say that here, this is where it's so helpful to bring other stakeholders in to your instrument development process, because oftentimes, I may not realize language is problematic in a certain way, but by bringing someone else in, they're able to help me rephrase or reword. So this is just a good reminder that Patty mentioned that earlier, but it's so important to bring them in, bring people in a way that can strengthen the survey. So as we end phase 1, we're really saying these are the questions we want to, once we begin to develop our questions, we get to this point where we're saying, okay, what is it that I really want to learn? And how can I be sure that my respondents understand what I'm asking? And how can I, try to ensure that the response they give today is the same as what they would give in 2 weeks, barring nothing greatly, vastly changing in their life over those 2 weeks, right? So questions 1 and 2, the questions in the orange really speak to the validity of our instruments. The third question, the purple question, speaks to the reliability of our instrument. And so we're going to talk a little bit about each of those things, how we can ensure those things as we move forward in the process.
So in phase 1, you did some heavy lifting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You did this research. You came together with probably a small group, or perhaps you did it independently. But now you've got an instrument, but you're not done, because in phase 2 you really want to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And this is where you really engage individuals, external members, to be able to take a look at that survey and do a couple of things. You want them to take a look at it and determine whether it's clear, if it's, understandable, whether it's relevant and appropriate as far as the survey items with regard to what it is that the survey purports to be measuring. And then you also want feedback if there are any gaps in the survey. And this is a really, really important thing to do, because sometimes when we are in it, we've just been immersed in it, we are blind sometimes.
Yeah.
To either the way it sounds because we know what we're trying to say, or things that may be missing that we overlooked. So phase 2 is inviting external members, subject matter experts, to come in, take a look at it, and give you feedback on that document. And so why do you want to do that? You want to do that because without validity, you don't really know whether what you're measuring is really providing any actionable kind of evidence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I was just saying with that, I think there's credibility and there's meaning that comes with that validity testing when we're able to say, we have, this data, this evidence to show that our survey measures what we said it was the construct that we said it was going to measure. And I think with that, it also, if the reader, the respondent understands the items, like we have that validation, we have that evidence that they understand it, it's going to minimize error, because oftentimes it might just be a lack of clarity in language.
And in phase 2, we are talking subject matter experts.
Yes.
And we would encourage you to go outside of your EPP.
Yeah.
You all have colleagues that are experts, in particular topic areas. Reach out beyond your particular EPP, just because it gives you, a wider lens in thinking it through. So after you've done that, you've gathered that feedback, you've determined, yes, all of my items were pertinent, or you know what, no, I can get rid of these 3, shortens the survey, and it's giving me what I want. The next phase that you need to do is now you go to your respondents.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you want to make sure that that survey is comprehensible to the individuals who are actually providing the data. You also want to know, how long does it really take to complete the survey? Because we can look at a survey and say, oh, it's going to take you 10 minutes. And lo and behold, when you actually have teacher candidates or others take the survey, it takes much longer, or it takes less time. So you want to know, how long did it take to complete it? You want to know if it's the readability. Did it make sense? Was it clear? Is there anything that was kind of fuzzy that you really need to kind of go in and rethink about the language? So you want to pull together a small group of whoever the population is that the survey is focused on, right? So a small group of teacher candidates or in-service teachers or teacher leaders, whomever, to go through that and give you feedback on each of those items. After you've done phase 3,
Mhm.
you now go to piloting the survey.
Mhm.
And so at this point, you've got subject matter feedback, you've gotten respondent feedback, you think you've got that survey in pretty good shape. So now you go to a larger sample in order to be able to do some reliability testing. And this really is going to help you facilitate the development of an implementation plan for the survey. So it's really a very methodical process for you to engage in.
Yeah. And we know that that can be a lot, right? So one of the things that we sought to do after we were walking through this process, through several tools that we were developing at Branch Ed, we said, you know what, let's create a toolkit that really does outline this process and provide resources and tools for individuals that are seeking to validate their instruments. And so that's what we're going to share with you next. And that is the survey development and validation process is the name of the tool. And it walks through those 5 phases we just talked about with a little bit of added detail in each one and provides appendices that support the work. You'll find sample emails to go out to focus group participants. You'll find, documentation and critical value tables to help you read your calculations. You will also find Excel spreadsheets that can help do those calculations for you, because we didn't even touch on that part, but within these phases, you're actually calculating the validity, some coefficients and things like that are going to guide that process. So there are Excel templates that allow you to just plug in your data and get those calculations. So all of that is available through the resource portal. So at this time, we're going to pause. Jennifer's going to throw a link in the chat that's going to link you to the specific page on the resource portal. You will have to log in, but this will, you'll see the survey development and validation process, and you'll see there are 2 options for download. One is the PDF that is the actual toolkit, and it contains all the appendices. And then you'll see a separate option to download that Excel spreadsheet that calculates that leverages the Loshi method to get your data there and calculates the Chromebox Alpha. So we're going to give you just a minute to grab that.
And kind of peruse it.
Yeah, feel free. We're going to take about 3 or 4 minutes for you to find it and maybe walk through it, begin looking at it, and see what you see.
We need some music.
I know.
in the
I wish
background.
I could sing.
No, that's okay.
Oh, we are in Nashville.
We are. That is true.
If you have any issues, let the chat know. Jennifer is monitoring the chat as well, and she can help you troubleshoot any issues you have getting the tool.
Ready?
Yeah. Okay. So let me tell you what we're going to do next, because you're going to have a little bit more time with the tool, but we want to do it we have a little bit of a structure to guide us through that continued exploration. So we are going to utilize breakout groups to help our exploration of the tool to discuss and capture some answers to these questions. And so you're going to have access to a Jamboard. You're going to see multiple pages on that Jamboard. Whatever breakout room you go to is the page on the Jamboard that you're using. You'll see. So if you're in room 3, there is a Jamboard page that says room 3 that you'll just tab right on over to. So there are a few things we're going to do here. You're going to talk amongst your group, and there's space on the Jamboard for you to record 3 things that you are taking away from the toolkit. So 3 takeaways. To maybe write or jot down a few things that are squared away in your mind about this process. What is super clear? You're like, I could go out and do that today. And then what questions are still circling in your mind about the process, or maybe about something that you would like to dig into a little bit more or receive some greater clarification around. Then at the bottom of the Jamboard, you're going to see an area where you can think about what instruments or tools you see a need for in your program that you would like to either develop or walk through this validation process for. All right. So Jennifer, if you could put that link to the Jamboard in the chat, and then go ahead. Do we have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions about this before we go into our rooms? Any questions about that? Can everybody get to the Jamboard? Great. I never set up the permissions right, but I'm pretty sure I did this time. So I think we're good. We'll go ahead. We'll do that. We will stay in this room so you can jump back if you have any questions. Feel free to come back to this room. But Jennifer, go ahead and take us away. We're going to have about 10 minutes together in these breakout rooms. Welcome back. So good to see you all. So
In the time that we have, would love to just take a moment and just hear from you, share out any ahas, any thoughts that come to mind, any questions you might still have, anything that you'd like to discuss with regard to the conversation you had in your breakout room. This is always the quiet time of our time together.
I could share one thing that we talked about.
Perfect.
Again, it's kind of personal to me, but one thing is, as we were kind of going through the document, I was kind of confused when it said Likert scale, because we were trying to go for more qualitative data. And then we were kind of all looking at it like, maybe this is just geared towards quantitative type surveys. Okay. So that was one of our kind of lingering questions is, oh, how do we develop a qualitative survey?
So I think, one of the things with validity and reliability testing is, there are some strategies that really do lend themselves better to quantitative data because we're looking at, a response, the way that responses stay over time. We're able to, statistically calculate the validity of those things. So oftentimes we see there are things we can do with qualitative surveys, but because the analysis is so different, that process looks so very different, right? Because we're not coming to a, do we get a 2 on this every time, right? Like, so it just looks a little bit different and would lend itself to a very different process because it's tied to the analysis. But very rich data to be had in qualitative surveys, certainly. But as you know, even the process of analysis, that's a whole nother way to look at survey data. Any other thoughts or questions or things that you'd like to share out?
I have a question. I have a lot of questions. I expressed to my groups that I don't have experience in this area. So this is very new to me. And I think it's fascinating, but I'll need much more time with the document.
Sure, exactly.
Are there, I don't want to sound lazy here. Are there shortcut methods where if you take somebody else's survey, you think that it could answer questions that you want to have answered, and you jump in the process at the point where you are evaluating that survey, so cut out the part where you're developing it. Could this still be
Sure.
useful for evaluating another survey?
Absolutely. So what I would say to that is there's a couple considerations. One would be you absolutely can. Oftentimes, I mean, if I've developed a tool, there are tools I've developed and I'm like, please use them, right? Like let's contribute to the body of evidence. The considerations I think are, I would still, to your point, evaluate the survey in light of the community and the context with which you are in. So that's where I would still bring in those stakeholders, those subject matter experts, to say, hey, friends, let's talk about this. Does this really meet the need that we have? Because what happened, and I would say in its entirety, because what happens when we start pulling apart the survey and we're only taking portions or certain questions, then any validity testing that was already done on the survey is no longer valid, right? Because that was tested as an instrument on its whole. Is this as a whole assessing this construct, looking at this idea? And as we start piecemeal kind of taking it apart, it doesn't mean that the questions can't still be good, and it doesn't mean it can't still be used, but that process of testing almost has to be re-entered because we aren't using it as it was tested, if that makes sense. So I think that's the things that I would say. Can you then say, we want to add questions to it, or we're going to use this as a supplement and only pull the data of the questions we're interested in? Potentially. Like there's some things you could do there. And we are happy, if you are working to develop a tool or looking at things, we're happy to meet also individually and just be like, let's talk about what that process would look like based on where you're entering into the cycle,
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Or anyone else want to add, maybe answer or contribute to a question? Welcome to do that as well.
Patrick.
Yes, we looked into this, but we started talking about the response rate for our surveys. We were talking about surveys that my institution and other institutions use for alumni as well as principals.
Oh, those are tough ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my own case, fortunately, it was very high response rate.
That's good.
The principals was problematic, and we talked about, how to the follow-up and the incentives and all that, because that is very, very important as far as the number.
It is.
Yeah, I was going to say, and those are the surveys that are always so problematic.
That's why, yeah.
Because they're not, they're not a group that, like your teacher candidates, right?
Captive audience.
They're not a captive audience. So I think that's a good point, though. That's another thing that needs to be thought about, is what is your response rate to these surveys?
Speaks to the data quality as well, right? If we only have 2 people, we can't make large generalized statements about this based on 2 responses out of 200. So I think a couple thoughts there is, I think that's a great conversation to have, and I think it's a conversation we have with our partners, because oftentimes as we've developed that partnership and we've said, hey, we are digging into this together, this is why we need this data from you. We want to make sure the teachers that are coming to your schools are, they are ready, they have the skills and the knowledge and the dispositions that align with what you expect from your teachers. So help us help you in a way, right? So really being able to point out the mutual benefit of some of these tools, I've found sometimes is helpful, but to your point, oftentimes it's follow-up, it's going back, but it is an important consideration when we talk about data quality.
Yeah, we also mentioned, especially on the part of the principals, the confidentiality involved. Maybe they don't want to really judge one of their teachers, employees that went through our program. They're worried about that. So that is very, very important. And I guess it's also the way the questions are phrased. Also.
Right. Sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
so
I'm going to share.
We believe feedback is a gift. We hope you'll have an opportunity to really kind of dive deep into the toolkit. But we would love to have your feedback with regard to this session. We're trying to be much more responsive to folks' times. The ability to have an hour and a half or 2 hours in the middle of the day is
Is a
becoming, it's a
luxury.
luxury, right?
We don't always have it.
So we're trying to be very, very respectful of that and try to make these workshops a little bit more contained so that you're able to get in, get good information, hopefully, and then continue to use it and then come back for more. So if you could do the QR code.
Or there's a link in the chat. Jennifer dropped a link in the chat.
And give us your feedback on today's session. Please know that we are here to support you. So as Elizabeth already said, if you've got any questions or need any assistance, please don't ever hesitate to reach out.
We'll put our email addresses in the
Perfect.
chat
Yeah.
as well. This is Patty, and then I'll put mine as well. And whenever you wrap up, feel free to go ahead and head out. But thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Feel free to reach out at any point, and we will have another workshop in this series that's looking at data dialogues. And so we invite you to come to that as well. That will be our April workshop. And so you can find that on our website. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Are
Thank
you going to
you.
CEC next week, anybody? Patty, are you going to CEC?
No.
So sad.
So sad, I know, right?
So sad. And Miriam, I have to say, Zoom always has the worst timing to want to update. It
Yes.
always happens to me.
At the worst timing. So we're glad you could still be a part of it, Miriam.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.